guys should have this handout from the day 3 lesson plan downloaded onto your device. We will be going over that after we talk about Madame Loisel and whether or not she's dynamic or static. So I'm going to stop sharing this. I'm going to ask that everybody do turn on their camera during this conversation. You are going to be getting a participation point for sending a chat in just a moment. And then also, if you get called on, that will also add to that. So my question to you all is, do you think Madame Loisel is dynamic or static? Now, let's review those definitions. What is the definition of a dynamic character? If you were to label them as dynamic, what would that mean? Let's hear from Philip. Philip, what would it mean if a character is dynamic?
Dynamic is when a character changes over the course of the story due to events that take place.
Very good, yes. So there has to be a documented change in the character, okay? And that really is the difference between talking about if a character is dynamic and talking about if they're round. So when you're focusing on these two different terms, round and dynamic are not the same thing. A dynamic character will be round, but a character can be round without being dynamic, okay? You could be a well-developed character and not change over the course of the novel or the course of the story, okay? So don't get those two ideas confused. Now, what does it mean if a character is static? Let's hear from Sam. Sam, what does it mean if a character is static?
It means that the character does not change no matter the events in the story.
Very good. They are not changing. Regardless of what happens, they start off one way and they're going to stay that way, okay? So let's go into Madame Loisel herself. So in the chat right now, this is where your participation point is coming into play. Is she dynamic or static in your opinion? All you need to send me right now is a word, dynamic or static, whatever you put on that handout, okay? I will be calling on people based off of this, so don't just throw out a word if you didn't actually do the handout, but you know, you could always take a guess too. All right. You guys have 40 seconds to get this typed up and sent in the chat. Looks like the majority of you guys are saying dynamic. Again, remember, you're just telling me if she's dynamic or static. Very simple, no need for explanations. You just say one of those words. About 15 seconds to send a chat. All right. So as of right now, if you have not sent a chat saying dynamic or static, you are not able to get a participation point. If you sent one, wonderful. So let's talk about this. It looks like overwhelmingly your class feels that she is dynamic. So you guys do think she has changed over the course of the novel, or the short story, sorry. I do want to remind you, with dynamic, remember, that means like internal change, okay? So if I call on you to explain why you think she's dynamic, make sure you're talking about an internal personality change, okay? Not just like now she's extra poor, okay? Because that's not making someone dynamic. So let's get into this. I will call on one person for static, because there's not that many people, and I'll call on 2 people for dynamic, okay? So let's hear from, for static first, let's hear from Brianna. Brianna, why do you feel she's static or did not change?
Because in the beginning of the story, she like has kind of she has a good amount of money, but she still wants a lot of things that she can't have. Mm-hmm. And like even though she like lost the necklace or whatever at the end of the story, and she's still really poor, she still wants more than she doesn't have.
Okay, so now my next question to you, Brianna, is what happened in the text, or like what did she say, what did she do that made you think she still wanted more at the end?
Well, because she blamed like all her issues and problems on her friend for like losing the necklace, I guess, and like she just wanted more.
Okay. Okay. So you probably could make a connection between those two, that like action or thought process for her and then wanting more. You would definitely, if we were writing about this, that would take more explaining, because technically like blaming her could mean a different personality trait, more like she's not accepting responsibility for her mistakes or for her greediness, you could say, and the consequences of that. Which that's also true at the beginning, right? Like she still doesn't care about what her greediness does to other people or the consequences of how greedy she might be. So you could definitely explain it the way you did, but you would just need more explanation if we were writing about it. You'd have to have a more in-depth warrant, but you could get there. You for sure could get there. All right, thank you, Brianna. Now let's hear from two people for dynamic. So most of you guys said this, so be prepared to explain. Let's hear from Eleanor. Eleanor, why do you feel she is dynamic?
I feel that she is dynamic because towards the beginning of it, she's more of a materialist and was really greedy. Like she just wanted more and more, even though she already had a good amount. But towards the end, she becomes more like settled, I guess is the word I'd use for it. She's more hardworking. I guess she understands like working, because most of the time she was more kind of at home while her husband was out working. And do I need evidence? Do I like show evidence?
No, you kind of explain that, because I mean your explanation of it kind of helps with that. Your evidence would be at the end how she's like actually having to go to work, right? And like she feels okay with that, and we know that because we actually, if you guys remember from your annotations, you looked up the word fortitude, meaning she did it and didn't complain about it, right? So that does prove that she is more so like accepting of the fact like she's got to do this and she's doing it, right? So at the beginning of the story though, we saw her very much so like not doing anything to help with anything, just asking for things, and that's all she did, which kind of shows that you're not very hardworking or independent as a person. So at the end, you could definitely argue that she did change. Like now she's more hardworking, or now she's more independent or satisfied with where she's at in life. Yeah, good. Okay, let's hear from one more person. Thank you, Eleanor. Let's hear from Oscar. Oscar, why do you feel she's dynamic?
I said she was dynamic because at the beginning of the story, she was she relied on her husband to go search for the necklace, and then towards the end of the story, when she had to pay her debt, she kind of said, "Oh no, I'm just gonna do this on my own." Okay. And then the same thing what Eleanor said about her not working before and then working at the end and being okay with it. Was another reason why.
Okay, so Oscar, I'm gonna ask. Your reason for why she changed is totally good, but I want you to attach like a personality trait to that. So what was she like at the beginning? What was she like at the end?
At the beginning, she was more dependent on her husband, and then towards the end of the story, she was more independent. And
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, great, Oscar. Thank you. So remember, guys, when we're talking about change, and Oscar was able to come up with this, so it's perfect. When you're describing a change in a character, you must identify like a character trait or personality trait if you want to fully analyze it, okay? Or else you're falling into kind of a summary, like, oh, at the beginning, she didn't like to work, and at the end, she was working. It's like, well, now you're just kind of summarizing like what happens. You're not actually analyzing the person in the story. So in order to analyze the person, you must identify a trait about them, okay? Like loving, hardworking, caring, manipulative, rude, whatever, okay? So if you did that, especially on your handout, you're good, all right? Now, that being said, we are gonna move into talking about this progress assessment that you guys have. It's going to deal with this idea of character development and the different types of characters. So this is kind of what you just did is practice for what you're going to be doing on this progress assessment as well. So I'm going to ask that you guys pull up that handout that you downloaded, and I'm going to pull it up on my side. You can shut off your cameras now because you're just going to be kind of following along with me. All right. Go ahead and give me a thumbs up when you have the handout on your device and you're looking at it. It says analysis skills progress assessment. Wonderful. I'm getting a few thumbs. I'm assuming the rest of you guys are still pulling it up. Good. I give you guys like 10 more seconds and then we're going to talk about this. I am going to add at the top of this a due date and how many points it's worth. So if you want to add this to yours as well, I highly recommend. So that way you know when it's due and how much it's going to affect your grade. All right, so let's talk about this. So your guys' due date for this assignment, I said, is going to be day 2 of next week. So I'll write day 2 of next week. That is going to be for you guys. Let's look at my calendar. So I don't see you guys on Monday. So that's going to be the 3rd for you guys, okay? So February 3rd, 21, okay? That is the day it is due. It will be due at the start of class, okay? So I'll add that onto here as well, at the start of class. You will have Tuesday's class to work or ask any last minute questions or ask me to look over something or whatever it might be, okay? How many points it's worth? So I'll write points. It's going to be worth 20 points, and this is going to go into the progress/mastery assessment category, okay? That means that it is getting graded for quality to an extent, okay? You must follow all the instructions. You must do your best to get things correct and be as thorough as possible and whatever, okay? And follow every bit that you're supposed to do. So that's going to lead me into the instructions. Do you guys have any questions about the due date or how many points it's worth or where those points are going? And you can always send those in the chat as well if you happen to think of something too. Okay, let's move forward. So basically your task is you are assigned to watch a movie of your choice, which is very exciting. I'm not telling you what movie you need to watch, and it'll be fun that you get to actually watch a movie for homework. The movie has to be rated PG-13 or less, no R-rated movies, okay? So if you're like, I'm a huge R-rated movie fan, too bad, so sad, I don't want to see one that is R-rated for this project, okay? PG-13 or less. While you're watching the movie, you need to pay attention to a few different things. You're going to pay attention to the plot, to the theme, and who can be considered are different character types of dynamic, static, flat, and round. I highly suggest taking some notes on this while watching the movie or shortly after. This will help with actually like doing the assignment. If you choose to do it on a movie that you've already watched, that is more than okay. But you do need to re-watch it in order to do this. Don't try to do it off of memory because more than likely I've seen the movie or I've at least heard about the movie or I will look up the movie. So you don't want to get things wrong. If you start saying things about characters that aren't true, if you're mixing up facts about characters, you will get points deducted for that. Okay, so please make sure you are actually watching this movie and not just picking some random movie that you watched 5 years ago and hoping you remember. Are there any questions at this point? Okay, so what you guys are actually going to be creating or submitting for this progress assessment. So you are going to create a video of yourself explaining the following 6 things, okay? So you need to be on camera videotaping yourself talking about this. This allows for you to verbally explain this stuff without having to actually like write out a paragraph or write an essay about this, okay? So it should be a little bit easier for those people who are like, I hate writing. It might be a little bit more awkward for those that don't like being on camera or verbally explaining things, but these are skills that you need, especially in the 21st century. You need to be able to practice this stuff. So it's a good time to do that. I also will be the only one watching this video. So if that makes you feel a little more comfortable, you don't have to worry about your peers watching it. It's just me. So going over the 6 things that you're going to actually talk about in this video. You, of course, have to state the title of the movie. I didn't think I had to say this, but then I was thinking about it. A lot of you guys probably won't even state the title, and you'll just assume I know what you're talking about. So please make sure you state what movie you're actually watching or doing your project on. You have to include a summary of the plot. So this is basically what happens in the story. But it is not as simple as just saying, oh, in the movie, blah, blah, blah happened. And then at the end, this happened. It's not that simple. You need to actually include our academic terms that deal with plot, which are exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. So for example, if I'm talking about a movie, I need to say, in the exposition, we learn about the setting, which is this, and the main characters, which are these people, and they kind of set up the story by showing us the town and blah, blah, blah. And then in the rising action, these couple things take place. In the climax, this is the big turning point, blah, blah, blah. Then the falling action takes place, and we have these events, and then the resolution is blah, 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 okay? So you actually have to say these terms and explain it. If you don't say these terms, you're gonna get points taken off, okay? I need to know that you know those terms and you know how to identify those things within a storyline, okay? The next thing is a proper thematic statement for the movie. So you have to come up with a theme. You guys know at this point what must be included in a thematic statement. So I will be grading this one pretty hard, okay? You know that it's not just a topic. You know that you can't say the theme of the movie is friendship because that's not a theme. So if you say something like that, you're just not going to get points at all, okay? So please make sure you review your notes on thematic statement, review your examples of thematic statements, and write a good one for the movie. Then the last 4 things are just about the character types, all right? So overall, you are going to explain 4 characters, all right? 1 dynamic character, 1 static character, 1 round character, and 1 flat character, okay? These characters must all be different characters, okay? So even though a dynamic character is usually round, you cannot explain the same person for dynamic and round. You have to have 1 for dynamic and 1 for round, okay? And same thing with static and flat, 1 individual character for those different types. So when you're explaining it, you're going to say something like, the character blank starts off as blank, and then by the end, they're this. And then you're going to actually explain how or why that took place, okay? So for example, if we're talking about the necklace, if you think she's dynamic, you'll say she starts off very materialistic, and by the end, she's less greedy or not materialistic. This happens because she ends up losing the necklace, and it forces her into working hard for what she has and paying all of this back, and it makes her realize that that wasn't useful to begin with, okay? So you have to actually explain it. You'll do the same thing for static. Choose a character, state the character name, say how they stay over the course of the story, and say how that happened or how you know that. And then for round, you'll say who's round, and you'll explain why they're round. And then for flat, you'll say who's flat and why they're flat, okay? Remember the difference for dynamic and static and round and flat. Dynamic and static are our characters changing. If they are, they're dynamic. If they're static, or if they're not, they're static. For round and flat, you're talking about how well a character is developed, or in other words, how well do we really know the character, okay? So if we know them very well, we know all sorts of character traits. We know everything about their life. Like, we see them all the time, and we know how they react to situations, and we see them having conversations with lots of people, and we can name at least like 4 character traits for them. They're going to be round, okay? For a flat character, we're not really going to know much about them. We probably know a few character traits, maybe 2, but that's it, okay? That would make them flat. Do you guys have any questions or want me to re-explain any of these 6 things that you need to include in the video? Okay. So getting into the actual requirements, your video should be no longer than 3 minutes, okay? I do not want to be watching 7-minute videos. So please make it no longer than 3 minutes. If it goes over by like 15, 20 seconds, that's not a big deal. I don't care about that, but it shouldn't go over by like a whole minute or more. Please make sure you speak clearly and re-watch the video to make sure you can actually hear yourself, okay? I need to be able to understand what you're saying because you're not turning in any writing with this. So if I can't understand you or I cannot hear you, you're gonna get points taken off because I won't know what you're actually saying, okay? Okay, Sam asked a great question. Can we use notes while speaking? Yes, you can use notes, but I don't want you reading from the notes. Like you're not gonna have the paper right in front of you and be blah, 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 okay? You should feel comfortable with the information that you're talking about. Now, if you're glancing down at something or you're like every once in a while kind of reading a sentence or so, that's not the biggest deal to me at all, but you should know your information for the most part, okay? So yes, you can use notes, but don't rely 100% on your notes. Another thing, your torso and above must be visible. During your guys' introduction videos at the beginning of the year, I don't know how many people I saw with just like their eyeballs real close to the camera, or just like their forehead and up, or just like their mouth, or like their ceiling, or like their shoulder. That's not okay for this. I need to see like at least your upper body, okay? You don't have to stand up in the video. You don't have to be moving around and dancing all over the camera, but I do need to see you, okay? So please make sure you are visible in your camera. You're gonna upload it to YouTube and then submit the link to Moodle just in case there's any issues with Moodle and it crashes, or just in case like you upload it early and then something happens to your iPad or your device and you can't get on it, or Wi-Fi goes down in the middle of you trying to upload it to Moodle or whatever. At least it's on a database other than your device, okay? So I can still access it somehow. Now, there is a way to get extra credit. You can use props, visual aids, fun backgrounds that are actually pertaining to the task, meaning they have to actually relate to the movie you're talking about or the task that you're doing. And you can earn up to 3 points of extra credit, okay? So that means you could get possibly a 23 out of 20, which is really helpful to you in this progress assessment, mastery assessment category, okay? Especially since you only have a couple of things going in there right now. But the one caveat is, in order to earn these points, everything else must be done correctly, okay? So what that means, if you forget to include one of these things, you will not be able to get extra credit. If one of these things is wrong, like you don't explain it correctly, or you write your thematic statement wrong, or you use one of these terms wrong, or forget one of these terms, or you forget to give the title of the movie, you will not get extra credit, okay? No matter how creative you are. So just make sure you're doing everything correctly. That also goes for if you are not meeting one of these requirements. So if I can't hear you, you're not gonna get extra credit. If your video is like 7 minutes long or 30 seconds long, you will not get extra credit. If I can't even see you as a person in the video, you're not getting extra credit, okay? So you have to make sure you follow all the instructions and you do everything correctly to get extra credit, okay? So I'm gonna stop sharing this and I'm gonna ask you guys, do you have any questions for me about what's expected from you or what you need to do or what this project is all about? Okay. Oh, yes. Josue, go ahead.
Just to like clarify, we just state the title, then a thematic statement, and then identify a character of like each dynamic, static, round, and flat.
You also have to include the summary of the movie as well with the plot stuff. Yeah, but yes, yep, you just kind of go through that stuff. Any other questions, clarifying questions? It's great. No? Okay, so while you guys are working for the next 15 minutes, what you are going to do is you're going to start thinking about what movie am I going to do for this project. Before you leave here today, so before 9:45, you are going to send me a movie title, okay? And that is going to be the movie that you are going to watch over the weekend or starting today to make sure that you can do this project, okay? If you change your mind, that's totally fine. You don't have to run it by me. Just make sure it's not R-rated, okay? One also disclaimer I want to give. A lot of people in my classes have been wanting to do comedy movies. Comedies are great, okay? We all love comedies. We like to laugh. But the hard thing with comedies for this project is that typically speaking, they're really hard to pull themes out of, okay? So be careful with that. You might struggle to come up with a theme for a comedy. But if you can, great. I'm not going to dock you because you did a comedy movie, okay? Also, a question just came in, can it be a kids movie or action type movie? 100%, yeah. A lot of my students have been doing like, someone wanted to do Frozen, someone did like the Star Wars movies, someone did or said they wanted to do, what was one of them? Some new like action sci-fi type movie on Netflix. Like, yeah, you can do whatever movie you want, whatever genre you want. That's totally fine, okay? It's up to you, okay? Any other questions before we get going? Okay, before you leave here, you need to send me a title of a movie, and just because you send it doesn't mean you can leave. I'm gonna tell you when you can go, okay? So send me a movie title. If you have questions as you're working, let me know.